Want to grow your own food and become self-reliant, but not sure how much land you actually need? Some people say you need 5 acres. Others claim you can do it on a suburban lot. The truth is, it depends. In this video, we'll break it down clearly so you can figure out what will work for you and your family. Welcome to Prepper's Paradigm, your channel dedicated to practical prepping and disaster preparedness. I use a computer-generated voice because my own is hard to understand due to an injury. Today, we're digging into a question that comes up time and again. How much land does it really take to feed your family? Whether you're planting a traditional garden, diving into permaculture, or raising livestock, we'll go over the space you'll need for each approach. We'll also look at how your local climate changes the equation and what to do if you don't have much land at all. There's no universal answer to how much land you need, because land isn't the only factor. Climate, rainfall, soil quality, and your chosen growing method all make a big difference. Someone growing food in the Appalachian foothills will have very different needs than someone trying to do the same in the Arizona desert. The way you grow food matters just as much. Traditional row gardening can be done intensively in a relatively small area, but needs more water and inputs. Permaculture or intensive methods like square-foot gardening can produce a lot with less inputs and management, especially when combined with smart design. And there's a big difference between growing some food and growing all your calories. Feeding a family of 4 for a weekend is one thing. Doing it year-round, through every season and every kind of weather, is a whole different challenge. This video focuses on full self-sufficiency, growing enough to live on, not just enough to supplement your grocery store runs. Let's start with the most familiar approach, traditional gardening, without raising animals. This usually means growing annual vegetables in rows or beds, like tomatoes, beans, potatoes, squash, and leafy greens. For a family of 4 to be fully self-sufficient using this method, you're looking at an absolute minimum of somewhere between 16,000 and 24,000 square feet. That's roughly a third to a half of an acre. It assumes you're growing staple crops for calories, not just salad greens. Potatoes, corn, beans, and winter squash are all heavy hitters for energy and storage. This number might sound low, but it's based on an intensive approach with high-yield crops, good soil, and a well-managed system. You'll need to replant continuously, rotate crops, compost effectively, and keep everything well-watered and weeded. But the catch is that this setup usually depends on outside inputs: fertilizer, pesticides, herbicides, and even water from municipal supplies or irrigation systems. If those aren't available, yields can drop fast. So while it might feed your family under ideal conditions, you're not truly self-sufficient if your garden needs regular store-bought supplies to function. The upside is simplicity. No animal care, no livestock feed to worry about. It's also easier to manage in suburban settings where livestock might not be allowed. But there are trade-offs. Without animals, your diet will be low in fat and complete proteins unless you add high-protein crops like beans or plan to supplement from other sources. Traditional gardening works, but it takes space, planning, and usually outside inputs. If you're not including animals, expect to make up the difference through storage, trade, or supplementation. Now, let's look at a different approach: permaculture. This method focuses on long-term sustainability, using perennial plants, food forest, natural soil building, and water catchment to create a self-sustaining system. A well-designed permaculture setup can often feed a family of 4 on around 1 acre of land, sometimes a bit less in ideal climates, but more in harsher ones. That's more space than intensive traditional gardening, but it trades land use for long-term sustainability and lower reliance on outside inputs. You're stacking functions, growing vertically as well as horizontally, and combining fruit and nut trees, shrubs, vines, ground covers, and root crops in the same space. Chickens might be part of the system too, eating bugs and fertilizing the ground. It takes time to establish and won't reach peak productivity in the first year, but once mature, a permaculture system can outperform traditional gardens in yield per square foot, especially when factoring in labor and inputs. You don't need to buy as many fertilizers or pesticides because the system does more of the work for you. That said, permaculture does require knowledge, observation, and careful planning. You'll be working with your land, not against it, but you'll need to understand how your local climate, soil, and native species behave. There's also less room for error if you're depending on it for survival. For those willing to put in the initial work, a permaculture-based system can make food self-sufficiency much more realistic, especially if you're short on resources or want to reduce dependence on outside inputs. Adding animals to your setup changes the equation entirely. It usually means needing more land, more water, and more daily work, but it also fills in some of the biggest nutritional gaps, especially fats and complete proteins. For a family of 4 aiming to be self-sufficient with animals included, plan on around 1.5 to 2 acres as a realistic starting point. That gives enough room for growing crops, rotating grazing, and managing waste naturally. If you want to raise larger livestock like pigs or a family milk cow, you may need more, especially in drier areas where pasture takes longer to recover. Chickens and rabbits are popular choices for smaller homesteads. They provide eggs or meat, and they don't need much space. A few goats can supply milk, clear brush, and fertilize as they go. Adding bees for honey or ducks for pest control can also play a role, depending on your climate and preferences. Animals bring benefits that gardens alone can't offer. You get a more balanced diet, natural fertilizer, and in some cases, labor savings, like chickens scratching up pests or turning compost. But the trade-off is that you'll have to feed them too. That often means growing extra grain or forage, buying feed, or cutting and storing hay. In a true grid-down situation, relying on purchased feed could become a major vulnerability. That's why many homesteaders grow feed crops alongside food crops, or limit livestock to breeds that can forage and thrive on what the land produces. Including animals in your self-sufficiency plan adds complexity, but it also adds resilience, if managed well and planned around your land's actual carrying capacity. How much land you need also depends heavily on where you live. Climate affects everything, from growing seasons and rainfall to how much irrigation or heating your system requires. Let's look at a few examples across different U.S. regions. Cold climates, northern states like Montana or Maine. Cold climates come with shorter growing seasons and longer winters. You'll need to focus on crops that grow fast or store well, like potatoes, cabbage, carrots, and winter squash. Greenhouses, cold frames, and indoor seed starting can extend the season, but you'll still need more space to grow enough in a short time. Expect to need closer to 2 acres or more for full self-sufficiency, especially if you're including animals. Heating, storage, and winter feed for livestock are also bigger considerations. Temperate climates, Midwest, Appalachians, Pacific Northwest. These areas are some of the most forgiving for homesteaders. With decent rainfall, good soil, and long growing seasons, you can get away with less land. A well-managed acre may be enough to feed a family of 4, especially if you're using intensive gardening or permaculture methods. If you include animals, aim for 1.5 to 2 acres to give room for grazing, growing feed, and rotating crops. Hot and dry climates, parts of Texas, Arizona, Nevada. Dry areas are a different kind of challenge. The growing season might be long, but water is always the limiting factor. Without irrigation or rainwater catchment, your yields will suffer. Mulching, shade structures, and drought-tolerant crops are essential. Permaculture designs that capture and store water, like swales, sunken beds, or gray water systems, can make a big difference. You might still need 2 acres or more to maintain self-sufficiency in these areas, unless you're using high-efficiency techniques and have reliable water access. Humid subtropical, the South and Gulf Coast. Here, the challenge is often pests, fungal disease, and extreme heat. You can grow almost year-round, which helps reduce the land needed. But managing the climate takes more labor and planning. You can sometimes get by with 1 to 1.5 acres, depending on what you grow and how much you rely on animals. Raising small livestock is often easier here due to the long grazing season, but heat stress and parasites are major issues. No matter where you live, knowing your local conditions and planning around them is key. Climate can either stretch your food production or force you to scale up just to get the same output. Not everyone has an acre or more to work with, and that's okay. Full self-sufficiency might not be realistic on a tiny lot, but you can still make a serious dent in your food needs with less space. Start by focusing on calorie-dense crops that store well. Potatoes, sweet potatoes, winter squash, and beans all produce a lot in a small footprint. Use vertical space for climbing crops like pole beans, tomatoes, or cucumbers. Raised beds, containers, and trellises can help you grow more in tight areas. Even with just a backyard or a suburban lot, growing 10 to 25% of your own food can reduce your dependence on outside systems. It also builds skills, and those will matter even more than harvest if things really go bad. Finally, keep in mind that self-sufficiency is a spectrum. You don't have to grow every calorie right now to make a real difference. The more you can produce, the more resilient you become. So how much land do you really need to be self-sufficient? There's no one-size-fits-all answer, but here's a general guide to summarize the absolute minimums. If you're growing intensively with no animals and using outside inputs, you might just manage on about half an acre, but that would require significant external inputs such as fertilizers. A permaculture system designed for long-term sustainability will likely need at least an acre. If you're raising animals for meat, milk, or eggs, plan on at least 1.5 to 2 acres, especially in areas with limited pasture or low rainfall. Your climate, soil, and growing method will all shape what's realistic. What works in the Pacific Northwest might fail completely in West Texas. And even with enough land, building a truly self-sufficient system takes time, trial, and effort. If you found this video useful, hit the like button and share it with others who are planning their own food system. Don't forget to subscribe for more practical prepping advice from a fellow prepper. Check the video description for useful links to help you plan your path to self-reliance, including a link to our website for more in-depth articles and resources. Thanks for watching Prepper's Paradigm, your channel dedicated to practical prepping and disaster preparedness.